Before the first city was built, before the first field was plowed, before the first wall was raised, every human on Earth lived like this. A small group moves silently through the pre-dawn dark. One man reads the ground with his fingertips, tracking by starlight. Another climbs a tree to scan the horizon. A woman locates a tuber beneath dry, cracked earth by the barely visible curl of a single stem above the surface. No tools except the ones they made. No map except the one carried in memory. No backup plan except each other. This isn't a reconstruction. This isn't a reenactment. This is Tuesday morning for the Hadza, and they may be the most important people alive today. Tanzania, East Africa, the land around Lake Eyasi sits at the edge of the Great Rift Valley, the same landscape where the earliest evidence of our species was found. Bones and tools pulled from the earth here have pushed the story of Homo sapiens back further than almost anywhere else on the planet. And in this same landscape, in this same valley, the Hadza have lived continuously for at least 10,000 years, possibly much longer. There are approximately 1,300 Hadza alive today. Of those, roughly 400 still live as full-time hunter-gatherers. No agriculture, no livestock, no stored wealth. They eat what the land provides every single day, the same way their ancestors did before the pyramids were conceived, before the wheel was invented, before any of the structures we call civilization existed. Every other culture on Earth has shifted, some gradually, some dramatically, toward farming, trade, and settlement. The Hadza did not because they couldn't, because by their own account, they didn't need to. That distinction matters more than it might first appear. Spend time with researchers who have studied the Hadza, and a picture emerges that challenges almost everything modern culture assumes about primitive life. The Hadza are not struggling, they are not desperate. They do not spend their days in exhausting, anxious pursuit of enough calories to survive. Studies measuring how the Hadza actually spend their time found that adults typically spend between 4 and 6 hours per day in active food acquisition. The rest of their time is spent in rest, social interaction, play, and the kind of unhurried presence that most people in developed nations actively pay money trying to recreate. When anthropologist James Woodburn studied Hadza economics in the 1960s, he introduced a term that has shaped the field ever since: immediate return economy. The Hadza invest effort and receive return almost immediately. They don't farm for a harvest months away. They don't save for a future that might not arrive. They acquire what they need when they need it, and then they stop. The contrast with what came after, the deferred return economy of agriculture, savings, investment, and compound anxiety about the future, is almost total. The Hadza are not a failed version of us. They are a different solution to the same problem of how to live. The knowledge required to sustain that solution is staggering. Hadza hunters carry mental maps of territories spanning hundreds of square miles. They track animals across terrain that trained wildlife researchers struggle to navigate. They read broken branches, disturbed soil, the direction of flight of startled birds, building a picture of what moved through an area and when, assembling information from dozens of subtle signals simultaneously. A Hadza hunter identifying a trail can estimate the species, the size, the direction of travel, and roughly how long ago the animal passed, from marks in the earth that most people would walk over without registering. The plant knowledge is equally extraordinary. The Hadza utilize over 800 species of plants and animals in their environment. Women foragers can locate tubers buried beneath dry ground by reading surface signs invisible to untrained eyes. The faintest trace of a dried stem, a slight discoloration in the soil, a barely perceptible depression in the Earth's surface. A single foraging trip can yield roots, berries, and plant medicines with nutritional and pharmacological properties that are only beginning to be documented by outside researchers. This is not simple knowledge. It took generations to build, and it is transmitted the same way it always has been, through direct experience, observation, and the kind of knowledge that lives in the hands and the eyes rather than on a page. The Hadza diet tells its own story. Studies of Hadza nutrition found something that has sent ripples through medical and evolutionary research. The Hadza gut microbiome, the ecosystem of bacteria living in the digestive system, is dramatically more diverse than that of people living in industrialized societies. Significantly more diverse. Some species of gut bacteria found in the Hadza are entirely absent in Western populations. Others exist in the Hadza at levels researchers had never previously recorded in living humans. The implications are considerable. Gut microbiome diversity is now understood to be closely linked to immune function, metabolic health, mental health, and resistance to chronic disease. The diseases that devastate modern populations, obesity, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, depression, are vanishingly rare among the Hadza. Their diet is extraordinary in its variety. Baobab fruit, eaten raw or processed into a paste. Wild honey hunted with the help of a bird species, the honey guide, that has co-evolved with the Hadza over thousands of years to lead them to hives in exchange for a share of the comb. Tubers, high in fiber, eaten year-round. Berries, seasonal and tracked with precise knowledge of when and where they peak. Meat from large and small game, eaten fresh, shared across the group within hours of a successful hunt. The seasonal variation is total. What the Hadza eat in the dry season barely resembles what they eat when the rains return. That constant dietary rotation across species, across plant and animal kingdoms, across the full spectrum of what the landscape offers, appears to be central to the microbiome diversity that researchers find so remarkable. The social structure of Hadza life carries its own intelligence. Groups are fluid, typically between 20 and 30 people, but the composition shifts constantly. Families moving between camps, individuals joining and leaving, the group reorganizing around changing resources and social dynamics. There is no chief, no formal hierarchy, no accumulation of power in the hands of one person or one family. Decisions are made by consensus, arrived at through conversation that can take hours. When agreement cannot be reached, the dissenting party typically leaves and joins another camp. Conflict resolution through mobility rather than dominance. Food sharing is not optional. A successful hunter does not own the animal he kills. The meat belongs to the group and is distributed according to needs and relationships, not based on who did the hunting. A man who hunts well and shares generously builds a reputation that functions as social capital, invisible wealth, held in the regard of the people around him, redeemable in reciprocal generosity when his own hunt fails. This is not idealism. It is a functional system that has sustained human life in this landscape for longer than any political system in recorded history. The Hadza are disappearing, not dramatically, not all at once, but the pressure on their territory and their way of life is intensifying in ways that accelerate every decade. Agricultural encroachment has reduced the land available for hunting and foraging. Tourism brings economic incentives that pull young Hadza toward settled life. Conservation projects, ironically, have in some cases restricted access to land the Hadza have used for millennia in order to protect wildlife for outside visitors. The population living as full hunter-gatherers has been declining. What is being lost is not simply a way of life. It is a body of knowledge about this specific landscape, about the plants and animals within it, about the social technologies for living in sustained relationship with a place that took tens of thousands of years to build and cannot be reconstructed once the last people who carry it are gone. Researchers working with the Hadza are racing against that clock. Linguists documenting the Hadza language, a language isolate, unrelated to any other language on Earth, its click consonants encoding knowledge structures that may have no equivalent in other tongues, are recording what they can before the speakers who hold the deepest knowledge are gone. Nutritionists studying the microbiome are trying to understand what the Hadza diet can teach medicine before the diet itself changes beyond recognition. The urgency is real. There is a question worth sitting with at the end of all this. The Hadza have lived in the same landscape, sustained by the same fundamental strategies, for longer than agriculture has existed anywhere on Earth. They have survived climate shifts, droughts, the rise and fall of civilizations around them, and the relentless pressure of a world reorganizing itself toward a completely different way of living. What they carry, the knowledge, the social intelligence, the relationship with a specific piece of Earth, represents something our species spent hundreds of thousands of years developing. It is the operating system that built us. Most of us have never seen it running. If this is the kind of story you want to go deeper on, the real history of how humans actually lived, what they knew, and what we've forgotten, subscribe and stay with us. Every episode of Ancestor Tactics goes further into that territory. Next time, we're looking at what the ancient world knew about food that modern science is only now beginning to confirm. Your ancestors didn't survive by accident, neither will you.